Well, good evening. Okay. Well, good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of April 21st, 2021. I hereby call this meeting to order. And just a few notes to begin with. We're still working under the governor's emergency Directive 21, and we have limited in-person attendance, and we also may have people who are watching this who are live streaming it. So as we look for public comments, we'll both be looking at the audience or asking the audience and asking folks online, and after requesting online phone comments, we'll hold for a minute because of the delay between our live stream and reality. With that, let's please stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, the first item of business is public comment. And I'll just read a quick statement. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak. If an agenda item is also listed as a public hearing, persons may wait to speak until that particular item, and you will be provided an opportunity. And with that, are there any comments from members of the audience? Seeing none, I would ask if there's anyone watching online if they have comments, and we'll give you some time to call in. And I might add to those who are live streaming this that the call-in number, 702-589-9629, is on your screen. Oh, okay, and I'll ask you to read them in now. I think that's enough time, so seeing no comments, we're going to move to comments that were mailed in to the city clerk's office. And Tammy, we appreciate that you're willing to read those.
Thank you, Chairman. The first public comment is from Susan McCormick. She says, the structure built at the above address, which I don't see on here. Oh, 971 Fairway Drive. The structure built at the above address is abomination. I saw it being constructed and called the city because I was appalled that a variance had been issued. Now I understand it was built without regard to the neighbors and to the city, and even then, no effort was made to be code compliant. The structure impacts the entire neighborhood. You can see it as you turn off El Camino onto Mancha. It is an eyesore and affects property values. It should be in an industrial area. I have lived in this house for 35 years and have seen many variances requests seen many variance requests denied for far less intrusive additions. Please deny this variance and ask the homeowner to remove it. Thank you, Susan McCormick. Next public comment. I am writing in favor of the building variance that is listed in today's agenda, section A and B. My name is Dane Safransky, and I own and live at Irene Drive, about 5 houses away from the residence before you. I also own a house that is vacant at Fairway Drive, about 10 houses down the street. I believe that the building and a wall that was started and mostly built are a great addition to the neighborhood and the way of life in Boulder City. The homeowner appears to have built a product that is of value and purpose, leading to potential neighborhood appreciation. I would like to take a couple of minutes to state my grievance with the fact that this is an issue at the board today. First, the building is listed as not material of the house. It appears to me the building and wall are consistent with all the same material used for building in modern construction, including in the house in question, and neighborhood as it stands. I see metal framing around the windows and in the form of lights, mailbox, flashing, and the whole side gate on the other end of the property. Granted, it's not the dominant material used. Metal and brick are foundations used in every structure, including the residence it's next to on both sides. Moreover, these same structures are permitted all over Boulder City, 1541, 42, 1544 Mancha Drive, and 889, 892, 897, and 900 Fairway, just to name a few in listed circle provided. Providing that typically the city agrees with my views that metal and cement block are an acceptable and common material for these types of structures in Boulder City. Unfortunately, I find this arbitrary and capricious. In regard to the lights that are permitted at 13 feet 2 inches tall, it's listed as on the wall. Is this correct, or is it on the structure or in the structure? It appears to me that the wall already has a couple lights on them and they are only inches from the top of the wall, leading me to believe that this is a typo. If it is, then the city may have placed an unfair advantage on their side by making others around him believe that he was attempting to build something that was not advantageous to his neighbors. The fact that the buildings were stopped before completion without any notice being typed and sent out about this intent would likely also lead to nearby neighbors to believe he is finished and leaving the site as is. I support lights in or on the structure aimed at his own residence, but not on the front wall built on a pole of some sort. I would like to close by pointing out that I believe this building should be approved and others like it should be approved to help individualize us from Vegas. Houses and lots in Boulder City were purposely built to hold toys, cars, boats, and motorized leisure vehicles to help keep clutter off the streets and highlight Boulder City's values. In the desert, the sun is our worst enemy, as we are absent in other natural disasters that other states have. Most of these leisure vehicles are literally tens to the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they deserve protection from the elements, theft, and vandalism. Finally, Boulder City has grown over its nearly 100-year existence, and this has caused major discrepancies in housing values. Surround areas to this residence appraise and sell up to $150,000 more for a similar size house due to modern amenities. I feel strongly that this property should be allowed to have these structures because A, they are not an eyesore, being built with consistent building materials, and B, increase the property values to the neighborhood to be more consistent with modern features found in surrounding parts of Boulder City. And that's the end of my public comments.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll close the public comment period, the initial public comment period. One thing I'd like to remind planning commissioners, please, as noted last month, please wait to be recognized before speaking, and that would allow Holly to get the camera turned to the right person. So the first item of business is approval of the minutes of the March 17th regular meeting. Does anyone have any comments? Any corrections? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The minutes have been approved. which brings us to the second order of business. Due to financial interest or involvement with the applicant, I've been advised to recuse myself from this particular item, so I'm going to turn the meeting over to the Vice Chair, Nate Lassoff.
All right, we'll get started. For possible action, V-21-651, Aaron Meadow, 376 Laurel Drive. Public hearing on an application for a variance in the R115 single-family residential zone for an addition which results in a combined side setback of 9.35 feet, whereas Section 11-3-5B of the City Code requires a minimum combined side setback of 15 feet. And Michael.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Michael Mays, your Community Development Director. Aaron Meadow, owner of 376 Laurel Drive, is seeking a variance from the required side yard setback to build a garage addition. In the in the R115 zoning, a combined 15-foot side yard setback is required. Mr. Meadow, with the proposed garage, is seeking a combined 8.35-foot side yard setback, so on both sides of the property. Included in this relief request is the existing cabana that was built on the property by a previous owner. The staff report includes plans and his justification for the requested relief. Section 1132.4 of the City Code sets criteria that must be met in order for a variance to be granted. The criteria is provided on page 13 of your packet. And wanted to show the Planning Commission as well as the audience an additional site plan, which shows on the left-hand side in blue the existing cabana, and on the right-hand side, the proposed garage addition. Staff has prepared findings for the Planning Commission consideration on page 14 of your packet, both in support and against the variance requests. These findings can be modified by the Planning Commission, but regardless of the Planning Commission motion, it should be subject to findings based on Planning Commission direction. Staff has also included 2 recommended conditions for Planning Commission consideration if you vote to support the variance. Mr. Meadow is here tonight to present his application, and as this is a variance, it also requires a public hearing. And with that overview, I can answer any staff questions, or if it's the Planning Commission's discretion, we could have Mr. Meadow come up and present his request.
Any questions from the Commission for staff? Did want to make one note. I had a meeting with Michael earlier this afternoon regarding the architect's drawings. And if you look at the red shaded box and the yellow shaded box, those are from the architect, and not necessarily, because my question was that red shaded box is already existing structure. For us to grant a variance for that didn't make sense to me, but what we're looking at is the combined side setback of 15 feet, not necessarily these shaded areas. So, no other questions for staff? We'll go ahead and ask the applicant to come on up.
Hello, thank you for having me.
State your name for the record, please.
Aaron Meadow, and property owner of 376 Laurel.
All right. Did you have anything that you wanted to add in addition to what Michael's already said?
Yes, so obviously the objective of this addition is to get more garage space because the property doesn't have enough for my own liking. So when we went to the design aspect of it, we've had at least 8 attempts to try to fit it in within the city's parameters. But unfortunately, there's some compounding factors that result in it really not being able to be erected how it should in that neighborhood, meaning that we have a garage that is already there and built, and we don't want to ruin the lines of that garage and the property line. Additionally, the cabana was already permitted prior to me occupying the house, and it was already approved by the city in writing, signed off. And so I guess what I'm asking is that I want some clarification to make sure that that is acceptable to you all as far as the cabana being there. And in addition to that, it does affect the other side of where I want to construct the garage in a very small portion. It's roughly the first 15 feet, and I believe it's shaded green. And so that's what that green is showing, is that that's where the intrusion is to where we cannot get the maximum 15 feet, and that's therefore what we're requesting on the variance is to allow that to go in.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I have some questions.
Sure, go ahead, Tom.
Speaking to Mike, Tom, please. Thank you.
One of my questions had to do with the 2 proposed variances and how they relate to the drawing, particularly with the measurements on which would be the west side. And I'm trying to relate that to the 3.85 because there's a multitude of different measurements down there along that barbecue.
Sure.
And I'm trying to come up with the ones that combine, there's a 3.30, there's a 3.84.
Yeah.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them. But the key one is that it would be the 3.85 one, right?
That's correct.
And that's the distance from property line to where?
To the cabana structure.
Okay, so there isn't really, it shows some combinations, but it doesn't show that exactly. I see that the 3.85 in the shaded area. I see it now. Okay, that answers that question. With regards to what you're doing is this new structure basically is going to feed into part of the old garage.
Correct.
I don't remember how many feet exactly, but quite a bit.
Yes.
And then there's going to be a large door on that particular access into the old garage.
Yes.
And then there's a side door too, or something there too, isn't there?
Yes. Just a man door for the side.
So vehicles will still go in, because it said in there that was going to be workshop and storage. So will one portion of that still be garage?
We're looking at being able to get vehicles in the pre-existing garage, yes, but that would be kind of more or less overflow, and it would primarily be used for more so like toys and not necessarily motor vehicles.
But you could nose a vehicle in there
Yes,
and still be able to come out of there.
correct.
Okay. And so with the 2 variances, I guess you have to kind of put them together. You got the 15 feet normal times 54.4 feet. And then what you propose for that is a small percentage of that amount.
Yes, I am
Okay.
requesting a smaller.
If you looked at the square footage for those 2 variances, I think they run about 20% of what would be normal.
Okay.
That was my comment. And the other thing is, what is your turning radius up there? For example, you got that great snub-nosed truck sitting outside. Can you back that out of that larger garage and turn, or you got to back down the driveway?
Yes, it will be one way. It will be coming up and then backing it out. And that was part of the problem as far as we had a lot of limiting factors, one of which was height and then total space, because it does narrow on that mouth that you're speaking of. And so the vehicles would only have the choice to come up and then go out on that particular truck. On a little car that we also have, would be able to make a turn. And
You have
then,
enough for turning radius for that, for your truck?
no, not for my truck. My truck would have to come in and then reverse out.
So you'd have to back down the driveway?
Correct.
Okay. And what is there, one more neighbor to the cul-de-sac?
Yeah, I only share the cul-de-sac really with one other neighbor, because the other, property owner right there, it's his backyard and he only has an access point. He doesn't have a true, driveway, and he doesn't come and go from there, just gardeners occasionally.
Couple other things, and then I'll leave it for the others. The barbecue is mentioned both as a cabana, but I think the proposal also mentions barbecue, but those are synonymous in terms of the proposal, aren't they?
That's correct, and it's existing.
Okay. So you really have a combination of several different variances going on here. And one, I think it's already noted that the solar, that's a separate, that'll get permitted to the electrical department, I assume anyhow, separately.
Yes, we're just trying to get the variance, to be accepted, and then we will put a full set of prints in front of the building department for, additional expansion on solar and so forth.
Okay. And so, the upstairs area that would be built over the barbecue and there's an expansion, for that second floor, and there's a circular stairway running up there and all that stuff. So that's all really related to the variance too, because it's on the same footprint as the barbecue,
Yes,
identical. And then the same with the decking on the other side.
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Can I say something else?
Yeah.
I do want to also mention that I have had an opportunity to speak to all of my neighbors that are touching the property lines, and I haven't had any pushback from any of my neighbors. They're all in acceptance of that, and I gave them a very thorough explanation with photographs and measurements, and in fact, one of my neighbors is in the audience in support of me pursuing this variance and getting it passed.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Beth.
Hi, just one quick question in terms of the view. The structure on top of the garage, does that impede anybody's view, including your own homes?
It does not, but that was the hardest part, to make sure that it didn't affect anybody. Oddly enough, it only really truly affected us because of the elevation on my neighbors behind me. But there were some changes that you're seeing in front of you that never made it in front of you that were requested as far as different heights and stuff for people, not necessarily to see the lake or anything, but to see like more mountains and things like that. So there have been edits and modifications so that all my neighbors were happy with what I was constructing.
Follow up on that, please. So what we're looking at, what's been presented, there's been a change?
No, this is the final copy that all my neighbors are happy with.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Do you have any written consent or letters from any of your neighbors?
I forwarded in an email stream to Susan on my neighbor that was going to be most affected, and then one of my neighbors is right here, and then the other neighbor. So the answer to your question is I only have an email stream that Susan was copied on.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Is there any other? Go ahead, Ernie.
Excuse me, I do have a question. When you put the solar on that upper... When you put that solar on the upper cabana cover, I can't tell from the direction of the roof whether, and this is probably an interesting thing, whether there will be a glare off of it to the lot above. And I think you might understand if there was any kind of reflective glare, it could be considered, even though it doesn't interfere with a height requirement review, it still could become problematic. Are you addressing that in any way, either by virtue of the way the panels are mounting or the type of panels you use?
Yeah, we're using black on black certainteed, and it does have an anti-glare construction to it. So I don't presume that it's going to be any nuisance to any neighbor.
Okay, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? I've got one. Aaron, do you know how high that, over the barbecue, you know what that height is gonna be?
Yes, it'd be 11 feet starting, and it would get erected up to 13 feet, and that was requested by my neighbor to be up that high. We originally planned it for being shorter.
Okay. So you're raising it up to protect his view shed?
Just because he wanted to see a mountain range.
Gotcha. And the, that height's not gonna block the view from the neighbor behind you?
No, I'm fortunate that they are really high behind me, and so it doesn't affect them in a negative way at all. It just blocks some houses that are a little bit lower in the neighborhood. And the current owner thinks that that's completely acceptable because he doesn't actually like looking at those houses anyways.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I had for you. Well, one more. You were talking about doing 8 different renditions about what you're going to do with the garage.
Yes.
Was there any consideration given to maybe doing a 3-car tandem garage building straight forward off of the front of your house? Taking out that center landscaping that you have and turning into the garage that way without having to come to us for a variance request for the side yard?
Yes, and we were super limited on 2 factors, one of which it didn't take much height to have our own obstruction of the lake, and then the second of which I'm at this plan already is taking out the majority of my driveway to correct the approach. And so unfortunately I don't have enough driveway to make that work. And so I've actually even been turned down by numerous contractors, concrete contractors, saying that what I'm proposing already is going to have its challenges, and these other scenarios, like you mentioned, would have made that even more challenging.
Gotcha. I think I hear what you're saying. The slope would be too great from the street level to the front of the garage level. Is that right?
Right, and then when it comes out, it would be impossible to get any, especially one of my trucks in there. They don't have a very good turning radius, even though they're not very long. But that is the objective, is to kind of dampen the sound, because I have had some noise complaints on my vehicles. And so I'm trying to dampen the sound and also have a storage, so I'm not storing them outside in my driveway because of tools and because nobody really likes, a bunch of vehicles out in their driveway.
Got it.
Mr. Vice Chairman, a couple more questions. Did you get anything resolved? Mr. Meadow, with the cables supports on the barrier for it's the cabling, I don't have the notes here. It was for one of the fence areas or...
Oh, for the railing?
Yeah, and it said something in there about that was something that hadn't been acknowledged or confirmed as whether that application could be used.
Our proposal on the second story roof deck is to do a wire railing that has been engineered and suitable for a second story.
Okay. And then, were there any issues with that retaining wall?
No, because we're staying quite a distance away from it, and I've also had a well-known engineer in town here stamp and engineer all of the structural already.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, last call for questions for the applicant. All right, seeing none, then Mr. Meadow, you are excused from the podium for now.
Okay, thank you very much.
This portion, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. We don't have any other emails, right, Tammy? Okay. And anybody wanting to call in for the public hearing, phone number is 702-589-9629. And we'll go ahead and give it about a minute or so.
Planning Commission public hearing.
Hi, I'm calling to see if this is, is this a time for the variance on the 971 Fairway Drive?
No, it's not.
I apologize. My apologies.
Okay.
Bye.
If anybody has any comment about the variance for 376 Laurel Drive, the phone number is 702-589-9629. All right, we will go. You have one? Oh, come on up, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, thank you. My name is Philip Fortuna. I live at 387 Avenue I here in Boulder City, which is the property kitty corner behind Mr. Meadows' property. And I noticed that one of the commissioners had asked a question about the neighbors. And so although I wasn't going to speak tonight, I thought that I would give my opinion on this. I can't speak for other neighbors, but I can only speak for myself and my wife, although she usually speaks for me. And we had a conversation with Mr. Meadow the other day where he went over, in fact, welcomed us to the house and showed us the outline of the proposed structure, the new structure, and then held up a pole so we could look from our back porch to see whether or not there were any line of sight issues that came with that as well, and expressed a willingness to make any changes necessary in order to make sure that our view corridors were not impeded. Fortunately, there was nothing except blocking some unsightly roofs, so we're very happy with that, and I just wanted to say that he's been extremely cooperative. That there's one other issue, which is, ironically, I'm unused to staying on this side because for 10 years until we moved here, I was the chairman of the Planning Commission in Klamath, Washington. And so we dealt with many variances, and I know the kind of issues that deal with, and some of them are like footprint issues, and how did the combined structures fill the property space, and does it seem to encroach and make it either unwalkable or just make it unsightly in terms of proportional to the space? Well, thanks to the blue outlines that Mr. Meadow had made, it's easy to see what this proposed structure would look like relative to the other structures in the area. And because of gradient differences and because of vegetation that's planted on the side, it actually sits quite well. I was concerned about that, but it sits quite well on the site. And I'm probably the person who sees that the most because I look right over not only the backyard, but that portion of it, and it seems proportional from an aerial viewpoint. I walk past it all the time, and it also will not be jarring because of that steep grade that's up there. So that's just one man's opinion, but I've struggled with these kind of issues, and so I just wanted to give an on-the-site report. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to. Otherwise, I will keep quiet.
I appreciate that. We can't take questions from you right now, but thanks.
Sure.
All right. I don't see anybody else to give public comment, so we will take it back to the Planning Commission for deliberation. Just a reminder that whatever motion we do make must be tied to findings. Anybody want to go first? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'm prepared to make a motion. In the case of variance 21651, I would like to suggest we conditionally approve the variance in accordance with the staff findings 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which address the criteria, and with the conditions 1 and 2 that are stated in our handouts. That's the motion.
All right. Second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, are we going to have a discussion before the motion is passed?
Yes, we could have further discussion if you like, but
I thought,
I did ask that at the very beginning.
pardon?
I did ask for deliberation at the very beginning. But
I
if you have
misunderstood.
a comment, go ahead.
I do have a comment, and it's not in opposition to the motion. It's just sort of an observation. And I don't know if any of you took the time to look at the examples that Susan provided. But none of those really were in the same particular area. And I think I would make one suggestion to staff, that in the future, when you reference variances for background, that you put the dates by them so a person can look them up without having to go through a series of minutes in the for example, if it happened in '07, you might look at 9 or 10 different sets of minutes before you find that variance. And so just a date tag on those would be helpful. And the only one that really plays into this, in my opinion, was one that was done on Judy Place. And I don't know, you probably are familiar with it. The house sits basically in the rocks. It's built right into the rocks, and very impressively. And the contingent on passing of that variance is they actually required the owner to put a deed restriction. He owned the adjacent lot, and he had to put a deed restriction on an adjacent lot for 14 feet, a side setback. And I only bring that up because if you look at the variances and where they fall below the 15 and the combinations thereof, all of these are arbitrary, every one of them, and as this is too. And I guess my point is that in the staff write-ups, and you'll see it time and again, one of the criteria is number 5, which says that the approval of a variance should not create a condition whereas a general or recurrent regulation is formed. And I would propose that that is not the case, that in almost every one of these cases, all of these variances play into any future decision. And although I don't think that this commission ever really recognizes that too much, but I really think that that is a critical point. So that's all I really have to say.
All right, we'll go ahead and call for the vote one more time, so we,
It was done.
Yeah.
I just was out of order.
I didn't hear if anybody even voted nay. So
No one voted
that was
nay.
my confusion. Okay,
It was unanimous.
well then we're good. All right, congratulations, Mr. Meadow, and I'll go ahead and turn the dais back over to the chairman for the next agenda.
Thank you, Nate, I appreciate that. So the next order of business, item number 3 is variance request 21-652, Jeffrey Bellows at 971 Fairway Drive. And this also will be a public hearing. It's an application for a variance for structures already built in the R17 single-family residential zone. There are 2 items here, an A item, which are the buildings themselves, and a B item, which is a wall height variance request. I'd like to take these separately to not confuse the issue. So, Michael, if you could talk about the accessory structure first.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do is just kind of highlight the broad overview, and then certainly the Planning Commission can ask questions on the first variance request with the accessory structure, and then tackle the second one. And I concur having separate votes would be appropriate for Planning Commission consideration of these variances. So Jeffrey Bellows is the owner of 971 Fairway Drive. And as you've noted, there are two variances being considered tonight. The first is to permit an accessory structure at 1,500 square feet in size, where the code only allows 1,000 square feet of accessory structure. The second is to allow a 6-foot high wall where a 4-foot high wall is permitted. In addition, there are lights, fenestrations that also exceed what the code permits within the R17 zoning district. So in the R17 zoning district, a maximum of 1,000 square feet of accessory structures is permitted when the structures are similar in color or design to the home. In addition, fences and walls in front yards cannot exceed 4 foot in height. Mr. Bellows constructed the accessory buildings and the wall without building permits. The staff report includes photos and drawings that talk about and explain his justification. As you can see on the screen, this is an aerial of the property, and this is an illustration that he's prepared showing both the existing accessory structures, which on the screen would be at the right end of the monitors, also in your packet, as well as the wall that was constructed, that portion of which is 6 feet in height. This is a photo showing the existing structures on the property. And as noted in the staff report, this is not finished. If he receives his variance request, he would be putting doors on the structures. And just for clarification, these are considered accessory structures in our code. Section 1132.4 of the City Code sets criteria that must be met in order for a variance to be granted. The criteria is provided on pages 40 and 41 of your packet. Staff has prepared findings for Planning Commission consideration starting on page 41. As the applicant is seeking two variances, you will note there are two sets of findings. 4 emails have been received by the city in opposition to the variance request. They are included in your packet starting on page 64. As with the previous variance request, the findings are provided for both variance requests, both in the affirmative if you support both of the variances or one of the variances, and against. These findings can be modified by the Planning Commission, but regardless of the Planning Commission motion, staff has also included 2 recommended conditions for Planning Commission consideration if you vote to approve the accessory structure variance. And with that, I can answer any questions the Planning Commission has, and at the chair's request, we can take them separately and starting with the accessory structures. We also have Mr. Bellows, who could not be here in person, but would like to present to the Planning Commission via phone.
Do we have any questions for staff? Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Marvin?
The first statement that you made was on the, I think it's the 2003 change to the regulations on the design, and it's color and materials. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Was that it? Mr. Marvin? Was that it?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff?
I have a question.
Mr. Rudd?
As we drive down the street, you see a lot of these metal buildings. Are they all permitted, or are the they fall under the carport because their back of them's open?
To be considered a carport, you have to have openings on 3 sides. And so, this clearly, the intent is not to be a carport. It is intended to have both the side wall and rear and front walls, garage doors. So it is considered as a garage, as an accessory structure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, for me,
Mr.
can I,
Lasso?
Michael, can I jump ship onto item B, or would you rather wait? I wanted to get a clarification on where the actual front wall is, because my definition of front looks like all he's building is sidewall. Am I mistaken there somewhere?
Chair's discretion if we want to tackle that now.
Yeah, let's go ahead, and so I guess I would just open it up for item B as well, at least for questions at this, well, yeah, for
I
questions
don't
at
have
this
one
point.
on A.
Okay. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions on the B or the wall item, please feel free to ask.
So to answer your question, you're asking for clarification on the location of that wall?
Yes, because it appears to me, based on these drawings and even driving by the property, that this is all side yard wall. Where is the front yard wall that should be limited to 4 feet?
So where, and this would be page 40, actually, page 50, where you see the illustration that was created by the applicant,
3, 51, 50. Got it?
showing the walls, which are 6 feet, which would be in conjunction with the proposed accessory structure that's being built.
So I have a question. So to me though, the house, the walls are behind the front of the house. So they're on the side of the house. So would the 4 foot only pertain to homes that are in front of the footprint of the home? Or do people's fences now on the side of their house need to be 4 foot tall too?
Yeah, in this case, as represented in the staff report, this is considered in the front yard, which requires a maximum 4 foot limit. If you look at the zoning history wall height on page 39, it helps to explain where 6 foot high fences are allowed in side and rear yards, and 4 foots are limited within the front yard. And this also, I believe, represents, and the consideration that needs to be taken in this lot, and actually let's go back to the lot orientation. So what is the challenge with understanding the zoning code in part is where you consider the front yard and the side yards. It's not necessarily the building orientation. It is where is the most narrow lot side. And so that is part of what is taken into consideration here, requiring the relief from the zoning code.
So the rightmost portion of that from the back of sidewalk to where the wall is already existing, that should be less than 20 feet, is that what we're saying?
Yes,
Got it.
because as you can see that the street curves as well. And that's why it's being considered a front yard and requiring the relief.
I have another question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Marvin?
The 2 wall sections, the one between the house and accessory building, and the one on the other side of the accessory building near the property line. In that drawing, it shows them that they're offset back of the corner of the house structure.
Correct.
I'm not clear that's the way it is, though, if you look at the photograph. that they're not set back, that they're actually, if you look at the photograph, they're in front.
It's the eave.
That's what?
It's the eave that's hanging over the wall is at the corner of the building.
Right here.
It's, but in plan view, they're showing the eave extending beyond the wall of the house. That's why it looks funny.
Does that answer your question?
I'm not sure.
I think it's the representation of the photos compared to the drawing that was prepared by the applicant.
Right. So the assumption is that those two walls that parallel the front of the house and parallel the front of the house are both back from the street further than the corner of the house.
Yes.
Just sitting back further. Okay. That's just my recollection and looking at it didn't look that way.
I have a question, Chairman. Anyway, so if it, just for clarification or, my own edification, what we're saying is that the code requires that walls be no higher than 4 foot high if they're within the first 20 feet behind the right-of-way within a yard. So irrespective of their location relative to a house or anything else, if they are in what is considered the front yard portion, which is the first 20 feet in from the city's right-of-way. And so in this case, and that's correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in this case, it's that one portion that's on the far, in our view of the drawing, the far right-hand side of that wall, segmented wall bit, that's within 20 feet.
Correct.
Okay.
That one segment, correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just looked at the assessor's map, and that right-of-way goes into their yard quite a ways, just because this is one of those streets that has the old 60-foot right-of-way. So it's not from back of sidewalk to that block wall. It is a number of feet behind the sidewalk to the block wall. I can see how that's easily under 20 feet.
Right. Any other questions for city staff? All right. With that, I'll excuse you, Michael, and let's get in touch with Mr. Bellows, please.
Hi, Mr. Bellows.
Yes.
You're on the speakerphone with the planning commission.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Bellows. This is Paul Matuska, Chairman of the Planning Commission. Welcome this evening. And
Thank you.
I don't know if you have been live streaming the meeting so far?
Yes, I have.
Okay, very good. And so this is your opportunity to provide any additional information that you might have that city staff did not convey, or anything else you'd like us to hear and understand.
Okay. Well, the last thing I watched you guys left off was the wall. To clarify, it's only the right side of the wall that's an issue, I guess, within the 20 foot. From the back of the curb, we have a 4'6" setback, which puts only a section of that wall within the 20-foot mark, is how Susan has explained it to me.
Correct.
Outside of that, the structures, I built them, I thought they were just considered RV covers. I was not aware that they were considered auxiliary structures. Otherwise, I would have done the proper steps and gone to you guys first.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir.
All right, so I think at this point, we on the Planning Commission have the opportunity to ask additional questions of you. And looking at the Planning Commission, does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Rudd?
Did you hire a licensed contractor to do this work, or did you sub it all out yourself? And are you a licensed contractor?
I am not a licensed contractor, and I used a company to build it that is licensed.
I have to apologize, Mr. Bellows. I didn't quite hear. You said you used a contractor that is, and I didn't catch the last word.
Yes, I used a contractor, a licensed contractor.
Ah, thank you.
Did your licensed contractor have a business license in the city of Boulder City?
I know they have one in Nevada. They are a national company.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Beth?
Hi, this is Beth Bonner. My question is, why you built or chose to build this differently than the materials used on the house? Why you went with the metal versus, the stucco siding?
I built this as just a temporary structure. It's not something I plan on being there permanently forever with the house. It's something we are building to store our boat for the time being, for the next couple of years, until I can afford the $100,000 shop or building that would be attached to the house.
All right. Any other questions at all? All right, it looks like we have no further questions. Mr. Bellows, you are welcome to jump off, or I presume, oh wait, no, you would have to ultimately, you'd have to get off the phone so that we can have a public hearing, and they may be coming in on that, comments may come in on that same line.
Okay.
So thank you very much for your time this evening, and we'll continue forward with this item.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right, that brings us to the public comment portion of this agenda item. And so first I would ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to be heard on this matter. And at the same time, I would encourage folks who are listening or live streaming this to call in. And the phone number to call in on is 702-589-9629. Now, is there anyone in the audience who would like to be heard? Hearing none or seeing none, we'll give it a minute to allow folks to call in who might wish to be heard on this matter.
Public hearing.
Hello, yes, I'd like to comment on this B21652.
Go ahead. State your
And
name, please.
Okay, so, Martin Vargas, 894 Shirley Lane. I sent an email regarding this. Apparently it didn't make the cutoff. So I'll just read my email to you that, I'm in opposition to this. The size of the structure is far too large for residential neighborhood. I would ask that you decline the application and have this commercial industrial structure modified so that it is compliant with city code. I have no issue with the 6-foot wall. However, the lighting should be in compliance with city code so that the lighting effect does not give the neighborhood an industrial or commercial appearance. And that's my comment. Thank you so much.
thank you very much.
Are you finished, Mr. Vargas? I am finished, thank you. Okay.
Oh, so we were hearing him. Given that there is a delay and that others may have been listening to Mr. Vargas, I'd like to give it another 30 seconds or so. Hearing no further comments, let's bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion, possible motion. As mentioned before, though, let's restrict our our first discussion with item A, and we'll hold the vote on that, and then we'll proceed on to item B, the wall. So before we have a motion, does anyone have any comments regarding this?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Marvin?
one of the things that is rather unworkable, in my opinion, is that the requirement, which went in 2003, that requires similar color and similar materials, there's no way that that's compatible with a metal building. And what little I understand in looking back at some of the records is that there were a couple of proposals that were made to try and get an architectural handle on that issue, and that those were pretty well, not accepted, and then this is what staff came up with as a result of that. But my viewpoint is that as long as you have a metal building being an accessory building and falling into these requirements, they're all going to violate. There's no way that they can meet the code. You have a stucco building, you aren't going to put a stucco front on a metal building. And if you have a wood frame, same thing. So you have a quandary here when it comes to this whole issue, and it's one that needs to be resolved if you're ever going to accomplish anything. That's just my viewpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DiTerra? DiTeresa, I apologize.
Close enough. At the beginning of the meeting, or beginning of the discussion, the acting city clerk read 2 emails, one positive, one negative. But in our agenda packet, all 4 of the emails in there were negative from people in the neighborhood. And also we just heard from Mr. Vargas. So I just want to point out that it doesn't appear that the people who live in that area are in favor of this. And it does, I drove by, it does look like an industrial building. and that includes the block wall. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing? I'm sorry, Ms. Bonner?
My comment is I agree with what Matt just said in terms of how that looks when you drive by it compared to the rest of the neighborhood and how big that structure is for storage of a boat.
Thank you. Mr.
Mr.
Maffa?
Chairman? Yeah, I would just say this is definitely the largest structure I saw in that area, and obviously that's because it's outside of the code of 1,000 square feet. The similar material and color to the house, I understand the hardships that there are to building that today, especially with lumber prices. And but he's building a detached garage instead of a one-of carport like we see in a lot of that doesn't have to be enclosed, and so it's a little bit different. You know, I've been watching planning commission meetings for I don't know how many years now, and one thing that always has stuck out to me, our former chairman and current assemblyman Glenn Lovett said, if we get something that comes to the planning commission and they didn't ask to do a permit up front, to me that's already one strike against you. And I think we need to send a message that people need to come to the city and get permits and do stuff correctly. So that's just my opinion. Thanks.
Very good. Mr. Biaski?
Just to put my thoughts in, first of all, I find quite a few things wrong with it. I agree with several of the other members already said it is a commercial-looking building. It does not have materials that match the house. If it had, that'd be an altogether different thing to consider. Frankly, I'm also concerned, like others, that there was no permit taken out. Anybody that's going to build a building that size and have a contractor, I find it hard to believe they would not be aware of that. So, you know, I'm not into building and then asking for forgiveness. There are other issues in here. Just because the lot size is what it is doesn't mitigate the fact that it still doesn't meet the requirements. So I clearly am opposed to this thing.
Very good. Well, I guess I'll heap mine on as well. I tend to agree with the rest of the commission, and just for absolute clarity's sake, and perhaps for the applicant, in the zone that this building resides, he would be allowed by right to build what I believe a metal building like that up to 700 square feet in area. However, once he exceeds that, then that does put him into the realm of a variance requirement. And the rules are very clear. Similar material and color. And I agree that this simply does not meet that standard in any way, shape, or form. And that would also would have limited him to 1,000 square feet, not the nearly 1,500 that has been constructed. Well, let's do this. I'm going to make a motion to deny this variance request based on the findings for denial as found in our packages. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question now that we have a second?
Sure.
Are we denying A and B on this, or just A?
At this point, we've just discussed A, so this will be a vote on item A only.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Assuming
Marvin.
it's a denial, what is the outcome of that denial?
The applicant has the opportunity to, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting my language. Appeal, thank you very much.
I understand.
To the city
that.
council.
Assuming it is denied, what are the consequences to the owner of the property?
I'm going to ask city staff to address that for us, please.
Well, presuming the applicant either does not appeal the decision of the planning commission and going to the city council, or the city council with that appeal concurs with the planning commission's decision, it would be up to staff to follow through with enforcement. This is work without a building permit. And so we would be having the property owner remove the structure or bring it into compliance with the code along with an appropriate building permit.
Mr. Chair, so I would assume one of the outcomes, I know in the building codes, there's like a 10% cost surcharge that can be put on that kind of stuff. But you clearly have the right to abate and proceed with abatement, assuming that's what is denied. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
No, I think we're beyond the questions to staff at this point. So we have a motion and a second. Let's take a vote. All in favor of denying the variance request, say aye.
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 All opposed to denial? The variance request has been denied for Part A. Part B, let's discuss Part B. As a matter of process, do we need to go through the public hearing element for Part B as well? Or would it be fair to say that comments received applied to both?
Yes. The intent was there was one public hearing for consideration of both variance requests.
Thank you very much. So public hearing is over, and I bring it back to the commission. And so here we're looking at a request to permit a wall 6 feet in height within a portion of the required front yard. And again, for clarity, that means within that 20-foot space between the right-of-way, well, basically 20 foot from the right-of-way. And as noted before, the right-of-way is roughly 0.86 feet behind the sidewalk at that point? Okay. And so a portion of this wall then falls within that 20-foot front yard area. Code would restrict that to 4 feet, and the applicant has constructed a wall to 6 feet at that point. The applicant has also requested 13.2 inch high light fixtures atop of that wall. And if I'm not mistaken, oh, you're prepared to speak. I apologize.
Oh, no. I think, just a clarification, yes. The fenestrations that are permitted is a foot, so this is just slightly above that with the lights.
Okay.
13.2 inches versus 12 inches.
Okay. While you're up there, any questions for staff? I do have one question. And I believe the package covered it well. I just want to make sure that I remember it correctly. Lights, or I guess the 12-foot allowance is specific to side walls on a street. Would you kind of clarify where those are allowed? And would a 12-inch light be allowed on a front wall by code?
Yeah, so where the code permits these lighting is specifically within the rear, and I'm looking for the section of the report that kind of addresses that. It's under page 40 of your staff report that talks about where these are permitted. So for the lights on top of the wall, these fixtures on top of walls enclosing a front or side yard as the applicant has an exceptionally wide yard, that is the reason for the relief being considered here for these lights. And this is to address the concerns about having larger lights that would have a more negative impact on adjacent property owners, which is the reason why you have the foot maximum. The assumption being taller lights are going to have light spillage onto adjacent property owners, and so that's why the code limits it to 1 foot.
Michael, I'm a little bit confused. Are we dealing just with the lights or that wall?
So that small portion of the wall, and this is the third paragraph on page 40.
Okay.
A very small portion of the wall is in the front yard. And that is because of the curve of the property
Right.
and the street and the actual setback, as noted by Commissioner Lassoff earlier. It's not where the street is, it's where the actual property line is. And so there is a portion of that wall at the very extreme right-hand side of the map that's on the screen that encroaches into the front yard because it is at 19 feet, 0.2 inches into the front yard. And so that portion of the wall otherwise would require a maximum of 4 foot, but it's at 6 foot. In addition to the light fenestrations that he has placed on there can only be a foot high, and they're at 13 inches, 0.2.
Right. I recall that the owner of the property said that wall was placed where the original wall was. He replaced the wall.
That's correct. Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So basically, it's the same footprint as the old wall.
Maybe.
So I guess my assumption is, if there was an incorrect wall placed there that had been there for whatever years, that's not a lot different than a number of other issues that come up when it comes to setbacks and other things. And so it seems to me that that's germane to whether you do anything with the wall, regardless of the lights.
Yeah, and I don't have verification as to where the previous wall was. So
I know.
I can't tell you its height or its location.
Yeah.
Holly, can you zoom in on this so Tom can see what I'm looking at? So that's an old Google Map street view. You can see the old gate that was there in the block wall. It's hard to tell what the height is or what the exact location is. Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Bunny.
That picture's also found, that same view is found on page 56 of the packet. You can see that, the old wall and the fence from an old Google map. In addition, I'd just like to note the, not that it might be relevant to anybody, but there appears to be a change in the color also.
A point that since we're really looking at this picture on page 56, and I'm not sure if we're really supposed to be discussing at this moment, but I'm just going to let her wrap. if you look at the wall, again on page 56, and if you look at the corner furthest to the right, and you can see over the wall, you can see the adjacent wall going back from that wall. What I'm trying to do is get a sense of height of the prior wall. It's clearly not much above the hood of the vehicle next to it, which would suggest less than 6 feet. And I would note that in driving by this property last week or this weekend, the wall, the side yard wall between the applicant's property and the adjacent property is at 4 feet, immediately behind the 6-foot wall that was constructed more or less parallel to the street. And I find that kind of interesting. So the side wall is in compliance as it comes into that front yard area at 4 feet. And the applicant has constructed a 6-foot wall butting up against that 4-foot wall, which would lead me to believe that perhaps the wall initially was 4 feet, but that I don't know that that's germane. We're really looking at what do we have in front of us today.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead, Beth.
One other thing I wanted to note about the original picture, you can tell that that wall was set back further, it appears, because of how it lines up with the house and related to the AC equipment. Just to point that out, if you're trying to do a comparison of where it was and where it is now. It's what it looks like on the picture.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lassoff.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just let you know where I stand on the issue. I think this lot in particular, there's a little bit of a technicality because of the location of it being on a cul-de-sac. But layman's view, you're looking at this property and it looks like they're constructing a 6-foot wall from their side yard. And I would be in favor, in this particular case, that we have 6-foot allowances for side yards. I get that this is front yard for a portion, but I would be in favor of approving this variance for the height. That's me.
Thank you. Let's finish up any of the questions for city staff. Seeing none, Michael, you're free to sit again. Okay, so let's bring it back to the commission. Any discussion, or do I hear a motion?
There's no other discussion, and I'll go ahead and approve item B with staff findings.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve. As a point of order, do we would it be the actual number of the variance, only sub-item B? Yes. I will make a motion to approve V-21-652, sub-item B only, subject to staff findings.
Do we have a second on that?
Second that.
Thank you. Any discussion on the part of the commission?
This, when we approve this, so they're gonna have to, basically, they'll have to dismantle this wall to bring it to code, correct? Because if it has wiring in it and everything, that's all gotta be inspected?
The motion as it stands right now is to approve the variance request to allow the wall to remain as it's been constructed.
Okay. It doesn't have to meet city code?
Well, we are, at least the motion is suggesting we would provide that variance, which would allow it to exceed city code requirements or height requirements.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the question is, do they still have to comply with building code requirements? And they do.
Oh, gotcha, sorry. All right, any other comments by staff, by planning commission? Okay. I guess I would just offer one comment that, again, as noted, the adjacent wall between the neighbor and this property is built to the proper 4-foot height, and this stands 2 feet above it at 6 feet. I certainly wouldn't have any issue with the lights, but I really believe that, we have code for a reason, and that personally I would not see a reason to grant this variance in this case. So
Mr. Chairman, the only thing that I would suggest is, just for the sake of discussion, if somebody's got a dog in their backyard, they're essentially fencing off their backyard and allowing for a 6-foot height. In this case, not in every front yard case, but in this case, they're fencing off their backyard. It's not really protruding beyond the front of the house, and so that's the reason for my justification.
very good, I appreciate that clarification. With that, let's bring it to vote. All in favor of approving this variance?
Aye.
Aye. All against? Nay?
Nay.
And who said the nay? Thank you. All righty, looks like the variance passes. And let's move for item B only, as noted.
Storybook home, let's go.
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 4. This is Storybook Homes, Boulder City Estates, zoning review of an amendment to a previously approved allotment application for a new model of a home. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as part of the allotment review process, each model of a dwelling unit that is going through the allotment process needs to go before the allotment committee for consideration to evaluate the character and quality of those models. And whenever there's a new model introduced, then that has to go through the process separately. In addition to the allotment committee's review, the planning commission has a role. It is to simply evaluate what's proposed, and in this case, we're looking at Storybook Homes, Boulder Hills Estates subdivision, and they have added a new model for consideration, which is on the screen and in your packet. The planning commission's role is to ensure compliance with zoning, not to evaluate character or the qualities of the elevations, just does it meet the requirements of the zoning, and then pass that on to the allotment committee, and that'll be part of the report for the allotment committee's consideration. Staff has reviewed this model, and it meets the zoning requirements. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at, I don't even know what page it is because I got an edited version, but it's the overhead of Storybook Homes with the red highlighted area, which is the area in question where this new model might be applied. And I'm not even sure how many homes are in that area. I think it's probably less than 40, but I don't know for sure. So let me see if I get this straight, Michael. What we're saying is the new model provides some flexibility with certain lots, provided that you have a setback situation that's different for the house in question in that model. Isn't that correct?
Setback situation, they have to adhere to the same setbacks, but you do have different lots that are regulated by the R17 and the R110 zoning.
Right, so you got a situation where there's a 15-foot, I believe, if the garage is at 20, isn't that correct? That's what the model is, I think, isn't it?
Well, what you're referring to actually, which is contained in the staff report, and is a little history regarding this particular development. This particular development received a variance, which permitted the homes to be up to 15 feet from the property line, front yard setback, exclusion of the garage, for up to 75% of the lots within the development.
And where is it at in terms of that percentage?
Well, it's not set. This house can fit on these lots within the terms of the zoning.
So, within the area that is being proposed, though, you have an X number of houses, and of that, 75% of them can fall into this model, is that correct?
No.
Then I'm totally goofed up then.
Okay. When the overall development was approved, one of the variances that was granted for the entire development was the ability for up to 75% of the 128 lots to potentially have, instead of the required 20-foot setback, a 15-foot setback.
So that's not really a factor then?
Correct. That's not a factor here. What the factor here is that staff has evaluated this home model, and based on the configurations of the home model, it will meet the zoning requirements. And so it's just the Planning Commission evaluating that and endorsing that so that it can go on to the allotment committee for consideration.
Provided with the alternative landscaping design, isn't that right?
The landscaping isn't the factor, it's the zoning compliance.
I get confused because there's two sets of landscaping design there for each of those houses.
Right. What is provided in your packet is showing the different alternatives for landscaping, certainly.
Okay.
But the Planning Commission's role is not to look at the landscaping,
Right.
it's not to look at the overall quality of the homes, it's just to affirm zoning compliance.
In this case, the 15-foot setback and 20-foot garage.
Well, again, we have evaluated this home. It meets the zoning requirements. Obviously, it will be dependent on which lot it goes on.
Could be that way, could be the other way. Could be a 20-footer.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
No, it's certainly appropriate questions and a learning process. And so the importance is that the city has evaluated a proposed model and can make sure it can fit on lots within the subdivision that is being contemplated. Because we wouldn't want the allotment committee and subsequently the city council to be evaluating a proposed development if it didn't meet zoning requirements.
Very good. Any other questions for city staff? All right. Thank you very much, Michael. So this is not a public hearing, unless I've missed something. And so with that, I would ask for any further comment and a recommendation in the form of a motion, I should say. Okay. Seeing no comments, I'll go ahead and make a motion that that model home number 5 should be forwarded to the allotment. Whoop.
I'll second.
Wait 1 second. I need to put it in the proper terminology.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve. Are we? I see. Okay, I would make a motion to approve AFDA-17-188 and send it forward to the allotment committee.
I second it again.
Thank you again. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay? It passes. Agenda item number 5, monthly progress report on development allotments.
This is a requirement to provide each month, and we have nothing further to add, but it shows the status of allotments for this construction year.
Very good. Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is final public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to comment on any of the agenda items that we have covered today? And I will give folks who are live streaming 1 additional minute to provide any call in to provide any comments they might have. Hearing no comments, I bring the final public comment period to close. Once again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you, city staff included, for your service to the community. We sincerely appreciate it, we really do. And with that, I bring to close the April 21st meeting of the Planning Commission.